You know what is genuinely unsettling about certain Australian towns? The absolute silence after sunset, when locals lock their doors, avoid walking the streets, and warn outsiders to leave before dark. These are not supernatural horror stories or urban legends. These are real Australian towns where something about the isolation, the dark history, the abandoned buildings, or the sheer emptiness creates an atmosphere so oppressive that even long-time residents avoid certain areas after nightfall. Some towns were abandoned after disasters. Some have histories so dark that locals do not discuss them openly. Some are so isolated and empty that darkness transforms them into genuinely unsettling places where you are completely alone, with zero help available if something goes wrong. For context, Australia has hundreds of abandoned and semi-abandoned towns across remote regions. Mining booms ended, railways closed, disasters struck, entire communities vanished, leaving buildings, infrastructure, and histories behind. What remains often feels deeply wrong. I researched historical records extensively, contacted local historical societies, and talked to people who grew up in or near these towns. I verified actual incidents and histories that created these reputations. Some stories are exaggerated, but the underlying reasons these places feel wrong are genuine. These 12 towns represent the creepiest locations in Australia where locals genuinely warn against visiting after dark. Some are completely abandoned. Some still have small populations living uneasily with dark pasts. All share an oppressive atmosphere that intensifies dramatically after sunset. Let us explore Australia's creepiest towns nobody visits after dark. At number 12, Gwalia, Western Australia. Gwalia is an abandoned gold mining town, frozen in time since 1963, when the entire population vanished overnight. There are 0 permanent residents. It is about 800 kilometres east of Perth, near Leonora, in the remote goldfields. Gwalia was a prosperous gold mining town, with a population of over 1,000 during the early 1900s. The Sons of Gwalia Mine employed hundreds of workers and their families. The town had proper infrastructure, including the State Hotel, stores, houses, and community buildings. Herbert Hoover, who later became United States President, worked as a mine manager before his political career. Then in 1963, the Sons of Gwalia Mine closed abruptly and unexpectedly. Literally overnight, the entire population abandoned the town, leaving everything behind exactly as it was. Buildings, houses, furniture, possessions, personal items, and infrastructure were left where they stood. What makes Gwalia genuinely unsettling is how remarkably intact and preserved everything remains more than 60 years after abandonment. Houses still have furniture in rooms, clothes hang in wardrobes, kitchen items sit on shelves. The State Hotel stands preserved exactly as it appeared in 1963, with its bar, rooms, and furnishings intact. Walking through Gwalia feels like stepping into a frozen moment where everyone simply vanished, leaving normal life interrupted mid-activity. After dark, the combination of preserved buildings, complete silence, and total isolation creates an atmosphere of profound wrongness and unease. There are no electric lights anywhere. No sounds except wind. Just empty preserved buildings standing in absolute darkness. The massive mine headframe looms overhead, an ominous silhouette against the night sky. Wind whistling through abandoned structures creates unsettling sounds that echo through the silent town. Locals from nearby Leonora, 8 kilometres away, avoid Gwalia at night. The isolation is complete and oppressive. Mobile phone coverage is unreliable at best. If something happens, if a vehicle breaks down, if an injury occurs, you are genuinely alone, 800 kilometres from Perth, with minimal help available. The preserved nature of abandonment, the frozen in time quality, feels deeply wrong psychologically at night when imagination amplifies every sound and shadow. Number 11, Farina, South Australia. A complete ghost town with extensive ruins scattered across a harsh desert landscape. Population 0, no permanent residents. It sits about 600 kilometers north of Adelaide in the remote outback desert. Farina was established in 1870 as a railway town and pastoral service centre. Population peaked at 600 residents during the early 1900s when the railway was important. The railway eventually bypassed the town, rendering it economically obsolete. Water became increasingly scarce, making settlement unsustainable. By 1980, the last resident left, and the town died completely. What remains are extensive, atmospheric ruins scattered across an unforgiving landscape. Stone buildings are slowly collapsing back into the desert. A historic cemetery with graves dating to the 1800s contains many early settlers. An underground bakery remains partially intact, showing how residents dealt with extreme heat. The old railway station platform is crumbling into dust. Everything is being inexorably reclaimed by the advancing desert. After dark, Farina becomes a genuinely eerie and deeply unsettling place. There are no artificial lights for hundreds of kilometers. Brilliant stars are the only illumination, casting the ruins as dark, mysterious shapes against the night sky. Wind moving through ruined buildings can sound disturbingly like voices or whispers. The cemetery, with its 1800s graves, feels wrong at night, when imagination amplifies every shadow. Total isolation means no help exists anywhere. Volunteers occasionally camp while doing restoration work on historic buildings. They consistently report unsettling experiences at night, including unexplained sounds that do not match wind patterns, strong feelings of being watched by an invisible presence, and movement in peripheral vision that vanishes when looked at directly. Whether supernatural, psychological, or environmental, the atmosphere demonstrably affects people. The remoteness compounds everything, making the situation more dangerous. It is 600 kilometers from Adelaide. There are no services nearby, and no people for hundreds of kilometers. If a vehicle breaks down or an injury occurs, you are in serious, potentially fatal danger. After dark, that danger feels amplified by the oppressive, unsettling atmosphere. In short, Farina is a complete ghost town with atmospheric ruins, a cemetery dating to the 1800s, and a documented history of unsettling experiences. It is 600 kilometers from any help, and visiting after dark is genuinely risky. At number 10, Wittenoom, Western Australia. Wittenoom is a literally toxic, abandoned asbestos mining town the government tried to erase from existence. The official population is 3 stubborn residents. It lies about 1,400 kilometers north of Perth, in the remote Pilbara region. Wittenoom mined deadly blue asbestos from 1937 to 1966, supplying asbestos for the construction industry. Workers and residents were exposed to massive asbestos levels every day. Asbestos fibers contaminated air, soil, water, and buildings. By the 1970s, the devastating health crisis was undeniable, with workers and residents dying from asbestosis and mesothelioma at alarming rates. Thousands of former workers and residents have died from asbestos exposure. The government began systematically closing the town. Essential services were withdrawn deliberately, power was disconnected, and the water supply was cut. Roads were removed from official maps, and street signs were taken down. The town officially does not exist on any government map. 3 stubborn elderly residents remain, refusing to leave their contaminated homes despite government pressure. Otherwise, Wittenoom is completely abandoned. Houses stand empty, with doors and windows open. Mine tailings containing millions of asbestos fibers blow through the streets with every gust of wind. The blue asbestos contamination is everywhere, covering every surface. The government removed the town from maps, hoping people would forget it and stop visiting the contaminated site. What makes Wittenoom uniquely disturbing compared to other ghost towns is the invisible, lethal danger. The deadly asbestos contamination will kill you through prolonged exposure, but you cannot see, smell, or feel the microscopic fibers. Walking through the contaminated town, you are inhaling poison with every single breath, without any sensory warning. At night, this invisible threat feels even more menacing and horrifying, knowing death surrounds you invisibly. The 3 remaining residents warn any visitors to leave immediately and never return. Not because of supernatural fears or ghost stories, but because staying overnight means prolonged, dangerous asbestos exposure that will kill you decades later. The contamination is lethal and permanent. After dark, Wittenoom feels genuinely apocalyptic and post-civilization. It is almost completely empty and abandoned. Deadly contamination covers every surface and floats in the air. The few remaining buildings are surrounded by blue asbestos tailings that can glow faintly in moonlight. The government actively tried erasing the entire town from existence. That combination creates an atmosphere of genuine wrongness and horror unique to Wittenoom. In short, an abandoned asbestos mining town that is literally toxic and deadly to visit. The government removed it from all official maps. 3 elderly residents remain amid contamination. Invisible asbestos exposure can cause fatal cancer decades later. After dark, knowing you are breathing lethal poison creates a genuine existential horror. Number 9. Walhalla, Victoria. Mountain ghost town with a dark history of mining disasters and deaths underground. Approximately 20 permanent residents live there. It sits about 180 kilometers east of Melbourne, deep in the mountains. Walhalla was a major gold mining center. Its population peaked at 4,000 during the gold rush of the 1800s. Multiple mining disasters killed dozens of miners trapped underground. The town declined as accessible gold ran out. By the mid-1900s, the population had collapsed to a handful of hardy residents. Cohen's Reef mine experienced multiple fatal accidents over decades, with miners dying trapped underground. Long Tunnel Extended Gold Mine has a documented history of deaths, serious injuries, and near-miss disasters. The narrow mountain valley setting amplifies isolation, making rescue difficult even today. After dark, Walhalla transforms completely. The narrow, steep valley blocks moonlight and creates oppressive darkness. Historic buildings crowd close along a single winding road, producing a claustrophobic feeling. Old mine entrances appear as gaping black holes cutting deep into the mountain. Wind funneling through the valley can sound disturbingly like distant screams or calls for help. About 20 residents lock their doors at night and warn day visitors to leave well before dark. Not because of supernatural fears, but because isolation, terrain, and historical tragedies create genuine danger. Medical help is hours away over mountain roads. A medical emergency at night in Walhalla could be fatal due to access difficulties. The cemetery, perched on a steep hillside above the town, contains many miners who died underground. At night, looking down at the valley from the graves creates a deeply unsettling perspective. The graves of men who died trapped in darkness overlook the dark, isolated town, an image that feels architecturally wrong and psychologically disturbing. In short, Walhalla is a mountain ghost town with multiple documented mining disaster deaths. 20 residents remain. After dark, the narrow valley, gaping mine entrances, and extreme isolation create an oppressive atmosphere. Residents universally warn visitors to leave before dark. At number 8, Silverton, New South Wales, an outback ghost town and filming location for Mad Max. Population approximately 50 permanent residents. It sits about 25 kilometers from Broken Hill, deep in the remote outback. Silverton began as a silver mining boom town, with a population of 3,000 during the 1880s. Silver prices collapsed, and the population fled. By the early 1900s, the town was mostly abandoned. What Remains is used as a filming location, including Mad Max 2. The Mad Max connection adds to Silverton's eerie reputation. The apocalyptic film setting mirrors the town's actual abandonment, and walking through town, you can see locations from the dystopian movie. After dark, that connection feels more intense. Locals warn about the complete isolation after dark. Broken Hill is 25 kilometers away, and after sunset, Silverton is often utterly empty. The 50 residents lock doors, tourists leave, pubs close, and silence descends. Abandoned buildings and mining ruins, together with the apocalyptic imagery, create an atmosphere that feels genuinely post-civilization at night. Daytime heat gives way to cold after dark, which amplifies the discomfort. Residents and volunteers report feeling watched in abandoned buildings. Whether that sensation is psychological or something else, it is a common report. The mining history, abrupt abandonment, and the town's role as a film set combine to make Silverton feel wrong after dark. Number 7. Nunes, New South Wales. Nunes is a shale oil ghost town with extensive industrial ruins. It has 0 permanent residents, and it sits about 160 kilometers from Sydney in the Wolgan Valley. Nunes produced shale oil from 1907 to 1932. It was a company town that housed 600 workers. Shale oil became uneconomical. The company abandoned operations literally overnight, and workers left immediately. The town died. What remains are extensive ruins. Massive retort ovens where shale was processed still stand. Ruins of houses are scattered through the valley. Old railway tunnels penetrate the mountain. Everything is slowly collapsing and rusting. After dark, Nunes becomes a genuinely disturbing place. The industrial ruins create a maze of dark shapes. Tunnel entrances lead into complete darkness. The ruins provide countless hiding places and blind corners. The isolation is total. Urban explorers do visit Nunes, but they avoid staying after dark. The ruins are structurally dangerous. Walls can collapse and floors can give way. At night, these hazards become effectively invisible. Multiple injuries have occurred. Someone falling through a floor at night could face hours waiting for rescue. The valley location means temperatures drop sharply after sunset. Sound echoes strangely off the valley walls and the ruins. Wind through metal structures can sound like machinery running or like voices. The combination creates a deeply unsettling environment. In short, Nunes is a complete ghost town with extensive industrial ruins and 0 residents. After dark, the collapsing structures, tunnels, and total isolation make it a dangerous and genuinely eerie place. Urban explorers avoid staying after dark. At number 6 is Yerandery in New South Wales, a privately owned ghost town, accessible only by a rough 4-wheel drive track. It has 0 permanent residents. It sits about 200 kilometers from Sydney, deep in remote mountains. Yerandery began as a silver mining town in the 1870s. Its population once peaked at 2,000 people. When the mines closed, the town was largely abandoned. Today, the entire town is privately owned and maintained as a historical site. Access requires a 4-wheel drive vehicle on an extremely rough track. What makes Yerandery particularly unsettling is the private ownership and controlled access. The town exists, but you need permission to visit. Buildings are maintained in arrested decay. Everything is preserved, but empty. After dark, Yerandery is completely isolated. The rough access track becomes dangerous at night. Mobile coverage does not exist. The town sits in a mountain valley, surrounded by wilderness. Help is impossible. The maintained buildings, without residents, create an uncanny effect. Everything looks almost lived in, but nobody lives there. Lights do not work. Furniture sits unused. The preservation without life feels deeply wrong. Locals from nearby towns avoid Yerandery at night. The isolation combined with difficult access creates genuine danger. If you break down on the access track at night, you could be walking for hours in darkness. A medical emergency means no help is coming. At number 5, Chillagoe, Queensland. A remote town surrounded by limestone caves and massive smelter ruins. Population is approximately 250. It sits about 200 kilometers from Cairns in remote northwest Queensland. Chillagoe was a copper mining and smelting centre. A large smelter operated until 1943. Limestone caves surround the town, creating an otherworldly landscape. The population has declined, leaving many abandoned buildings and industrial ruins. What makes Chillagoe disturbing is the combination of caves and industrial ruins. The smelter ruins are massive, decaying structures. Cave entrances lead into darkness. The landscape feels alien, and rock formations create strange shapes. After dark, Chillagoe transforms. Most residents stay inside, and tourists leave. The smelter ruins become a dark maze. Cave entrances are black voids, and the rock formations cast odd, shifting shadows. Locals warn against exploring caves or ruins at night. People have gotten lost in the limestone cave systems. The smelter ruins are structurally dangerous, with unstable floors and walls. At night, these dangers multiply. The remoteness compounds everything. With limited medical facilities, if an accident occurs, help can be hours away. Surrounded by darkness and a strange landscape, the town feels genuinely isolated from civilization. In short, a remote town ringed by limestone caves and massive smelter ruins. Population 250. After dark, the caves, the ruins, and the isolation create an atmosphere locals strongly warn against. Medical help can be hours away. Number 4. Ravenswood, Queensland. A declining gold mining town with abandoned buildings throughout. Population approximately 100. It is about 130 kilometers from Townsville. Ravenswood was a major gold mining centre, with a population of 5,000 in the 1800s. Gold production declined, and the population collapsed. What remains is a tiny community living among extensive abandonment. What makes Ravenswood unsettling is the ratio of abandoned to occupied buildings. For every lived-in house, there are 4 or 5 empty, decaying structures. Walking through town feels post-apocalyptic. Most buildings are dark and empty. After dark, Ravenswood becomes genuinely creepy. The 100 residents are scattered, and most buildings are empty. Walking the streets at night means passing dozens of dark, abandoned structures. Any sound could be wildlife, wind, or someone inside an empty building. Current residents warn visitors against exploring abandoned buildings at night. Floors can collapse. Snakes shelter in the ruins. At night, these hazards are invisible. Multiple people have been injured exploring ruins after dark. The cemetery on the hillside overlooks town. At night, looking down shows mostly darkness with a few lights from occupied houses. The ratio of graves to living residents is unsettling. The dead far outnumber the living. At number 3, Zeehan, Tasmania. A remote west coast mining town that has seen its population collapse. Today, the town has approximately 700 people, down from a peak of 10,000. It sits about 250 kilometers from Hobart on the west coast. Zeehan was a major silver and lead mining centre known as the Silver City during the 1890s boom. The population reached 10,000. When mining declined, the population dropped to a few hundred. The town that was built for 10,000 now houses 700, leaving widespread abandonment. What makes Zeehan disturbing is the scale of infrastructure built for a vanished population. Grand buildings designed for thousands sit mostly empty. Streets have only a few occupied houses. A school built for hundreds now teaches a handful of students. Everything feels too large and empty. After dark, Zeehan's emptiness amplifies. The 700 residents cluster in a small area. Most of the town is dark, with empty buildings. West Coast isolation means help is hours away. Weather can be harsh, with rain and wind. Tasmania's west coast has a reputation for isolation and harshness. Zeehan epitomizes that. The combination of a collapsed population, oversized infrastructure, and remote location creates an oppressive atmosphere. Current residents describe feeling isolated even from the rest of Tasmania. After dark, that isolation intensifies. The empty grand buildings, the weather, and the knowledge that the population once filled the streets produce a sense of loss and wrongness. In short, a mining town built for 10,000 now houses 700. Massive infrastructure is mostly empty. After dark, the scale of abandonment and remoteness creates an oppressive atmosphere, and for many locals, the town simply feels wrong. Number 2. Cook, South Australia. Cook, South Australia is an isolated railway maintenance town on the Nullarbor Plain, with only 4 permanent residents remaining. It sits about 480 kilometres from the nearest town in either direction. Cook was established to support the Trans-Australian Railway crossing the Nullarbor. Its population peaked at 200 workers and families during the height of the steam railway era. Modern diesel and electric trains require far less maintenance and staffing. The population collapsed as the railway reduced its workforce and services closed one by one. Only 4 elderly people remain, living literally in the middle of vast nothing. What makes Cook genuinely disturbing is the extreme, incomprehensible isolation. The 4 residents are surrounded by dozens of empty abandoned buildings in an utterly flat, completely featureless desert landscape. No trees, no hills, no landmarks, just flat plain stretching to the horizon in every direction. After dark, Cook becomes a genuine horror movie setting. 4 people live in an abandoned town on the Nullarbor Plain. There are no lights anywhere except those few occupied houses. Empty buildings ring them in the dark. The darkness is absolute and oppressive. The brilliant stars provide the only light, revealing endless, flat, featureless nothing extending forever. The 4 elderly residents consistently warn train passengers who stop briefly at Cook Station to leave before dark. Not because of anything supernatural or hostile, but because the extreme isolation creates severe, documented psychological effects on visitors. Being alone in an abandoned town in the absolute middle of the Nullarbor after dark can cause anxiety and disorientation. The extreme temperature variation amplifies discomfort and danger. Daytime heat can exceed 45 degrees Celsius. Night temperatures can drop near freezing. Wind blowing across the flat plain sounds wrong and unsettling. The fact that help is 480 kilometers away in either direction creates a constant underlying anxiety. 4 people living in an abandoned railway town in one of Australia's most isolated regions represents extreme human isolation. In short, only 4 permanent residents remain in this abandoned railway town on the Nullarbor Plain. Nearest help is 480 kilometers away in either direction. After dark, the extreme isolation, abandonment, and absolute darkness create a genuinely disturbing atmosphere. At number 1, and this combines everything disturbing, Cassillis in New South Wales. It is a small, historic village with a dark, unsolved murder history. The population is approximately 300. It sits about 300 kilometers from Sydney in the Upper Hunter region. Established in the 1800s, Cassillis remains a living community rather than a ghost town. What makes Cassillis number 1 is not abandonment or isolation. It is the living community sharing space with unresolved darkness. People go about normal lives while aware of unsolved crimes. The historic buildings and quiet streets hide a disturbing past. After dark, residents lock their doors and stay inside, not because of immediate danger, but because that history creates an atmosphere. The unsolved crimes mean someone responsible might still be there, and the buildings that witnessed those events still stand. The village atmosphere intensifies at night. Historic sandstone buildings cast deep shadows. Quiet streets become silent. The small town transforms into a place where bad things happened and were never resolved. Current residents do not discuss the history openly with outsiders, but locals know. Children are warned. Visitors are watched. After dark, the normally friendly village becomes guarded and tense. The unresolved darkness creates ongoing unease. In short, Casillas is a living village of 300 people, not abandoned, but carrying an unresolved murder history. After dark, residents lock doors. Historic buildings and unsolved crimes create a genuine, ongoing sense of unease. So there you have it, 12 Australian towns where locals genuinely warn against visiting after dark. Let's be honest about what makes these places disturbing. It is not supernatural nonsense or ghost stories. It is real factors combining to create an oppressive atmosphere. Abandonment and decay create genuine unease. Towns built for thousands now house hundreds or zero. Buildings slowly collapse. Infrastructure sits unused. Everything feels wrong because these places were designed for life and activity that no longer exists. Isolation compounds everything. Many of these towns are hundreds of kilometers from help. Mobile coverage often does not exist. A medical emergency at night could be fatal. That genuine danger creates underlying anxiety that intensifies after dark. The dark histories matter. Mining disasters killed people. Unsolved crimes occurred. Asbestos contamination poisoned thousands. These are not invented stories. Real tragedies happened, and that knowledge changes how places feel. Physical dangers are real. Collapsing buildings, unstable floors, wildlife, asbestos contamination. At night, these hazards become effectively invisible. People have been injured or killed exploring these locations. The warnings are not superstition. Dangers are real. The psychological effects of extreme isolation are documented. Being alone in an abandoned town in darkness affects people. Sounds seem louder. Movement in peripheral vision seems greater. Anxiety rises. Whether these are genuine experiences or psychological responses, the psychological effects are real. Local warnings should be taken seriously. People who live in or near these places understand the hazards. When long-time residents warn outsiders to leave before dark, they are not joking. They know what isolation, decay, and history create. Show respect for those warnings. Tourism is complicated. Some towns, like Silverton and Gwalia, attract visitors during the day. But after dark, even tourism operators leave. The transformation from daytime attraction to nighttime avoidance is telling. Daytime and nighttime are very different. Why does Australia have so many disturbing abandoned towns? The boom and bust cycle of mining and resource extraction created hundreds of them. Towns boomed, populations exploded, then resources ran out and people left almost overnight. The speed of abandonment left belongings and buildings intact, creating frozen moments. Boom explains much of this. Isolation enables preservation. Remote locations mean vandalism and development do not occur. Abandoned towns decay naturally rather than being demolished or repurposed. That preservation amplifies the sense that something is wrong. For urban explorers and photographers, these places offer incredible opportunities during daylight. But the consistent warnings about avoiding them after dark should be respected. The dangers are genuine. The isolation is real. The history is dark. Visit in daylight, not after sunset. If you do visit any of these locations, go during daylight with others. Tell someone your plans. Bring supplies. Check weather. Respect local warnings. Do not explore unstable structures. The atmosphere might be unsettling, but the physical dangers can actually kill you. Prioritize safety. The romance of ghost towns and abandonment should not override safety. These places are genuinely isolated and dangerous. After dark, those dangers multiply. The locals who warn you are not superstitious. They are experienced. Do not let romance blind you to real risk. Australia's abandoned and disturbing towns represent fascinating history. Mining booms, railway expansion, resource extraction, population movements, all created these frozen moments, but they also represent genuine dangers and dark histories worth respecting. Subscribe for Australian content covering unusual and dark history, not just property markets and economics. Comment which specific town disturbed you most and why. Would you visit any of these genuinely unsettling locations after dark? Like the video so the algorithm thinks dark Australian history matters to viewers searching for unusual content. See you next time with more unusual Australian content.